Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're here today to take a look at Strategy 5 of Shaun Attwood's UnMaking a Murderer. Before I start, though, I want to go ahead and say that anybody who's just coming off of watching Making a Murderer, and you're just, say, coming into the Facebook groups or getting on Twitter and stuff like that, that I suggest you read this book. I suggest you read this book because this book has a lot of the information that was talked about in the early days on social media when a lot of the documents were coming out and stuff like that. This book has a lot of that information that might be otherwise hard to dig up on your own right now. So I suggest this as a kind of a stepping stone after you've read the after you've seen the documentary, to read this book and possibly An Innocent Killer by Michael Griesbach. Possibly. But Michael Griesbach has some issues too, but I feel he's a much better choice than Kratz. Okay, Kratz is not where you want to go at all for any sort of truth. But so that's my suggestion there, is that if you've just come off of MAM, go ahead and pick up this book, because it's going to help you get a lot more information on the case that would take you otherwise a very long time to dig up, and it'll give you some good places to start looking, in my opinion. So we'll move on. We'll go into where the way that this strategy starts. The strategy is basically paying expert witnesses to lie, and that's what this chapter is basically called. So it goes over FBI agent Mark LeBeau being a paid prosecution expert who testified that the stains in the RAV4 did not have EDTA in them. So that's why he was there. But the thing is that there's all kinds of shadiness around this whole EDTA test, and I'll go into that. But he starts off the chapter talking about a particular expert witness that had testified in two separate men's trials. He doesn't name the guy, or the person. I don't even know if it's a guy. But he doesn't name the person, but he states that this person was responsible for giving expert testimony in two different cases where the men were eventually proved wrongfully convicted, and they were exonerated. So it's just an interesting thing, and it leads into what he talks about, how it really comes down to whoever puts on the best show, whoever puts on the best theatrics, and which the prosecution is usually always set up to do it much better than the defense usually is. That's just given, obviously, because they have the resources of the state or the county or whatever to go ahead and pay for expert witnesses and such things like that. So he also goes into the fact that the blood vial, he goes into how it was found and how it was discovered, and kind of what happened with it and stuff like that, that leads into Mark LeBeau entering the situation when he basically agrees to do EDTA testing on the vial, on the blood, and on the stains in the RAV4 and so forth. So the problem that occurs is he did all of the testing. He came up with the test all on his own. He wrote all the reports regarding it. He basically, it was all him. And he says that he submitted it to an independent scientist, laboratory to check it out and essentially see if it was correct or not. And he says that it was approved. Well, in fact, this independent laboratory he's talking about, it's just other employees of the FBI. They're actually on the FBI's payroll. So he really had no independent testing. He had no independent confirmation of this testing that he created all on his own. And he created it in almost record time. He recreated it. He created this test and tested it all out and made sure that it was a functional test all in 2 weeks. Now, it's a little bit strange, in my opinion, that he claims that's possible. He goes on, and Jerry Buting even starts asking him in cross-examination. He basically starts saying, he points out to LeBeau that he says, "You're not an EDTA expert, are you?" And to which LeBeau's like, "No, not really. I'm not an EDTA expert." And he's like, "So you're not actually really you're not sought for your expertise in EDTA, are you?" To which Mark LeBeau has to say, "No, I'm not." Which, it just gives you the idea that this guy, number one, doesn't usually work with EDTA, so he kind of would have had to take a bit of a crash course in it, right? To be able to create a scientific test for it, you would think he would have to learn some things about it that he might not already know. That's all I'm saying. And that would take time. That's all I'm saying, right? So that would take time. And yet he got all of this done in a record time. I'm not saying that he was being dishonest. I'll put it that way. I'm not sitting here saying Mark LeBeau is a dishonest person. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that he may have been overzealous in his pursuit of what he felt was justice, and he maybe rushed what he was doing and maybe skipped some steps and or something like that. So that's all I'm saying when it comes to Mark LeBeau. But I'm not gonna go as far as to say he was maliciously lying on the stand, but I will go as far as to say that he may have fudged things a bit because he was just overzealous to help the prosecution in this case. So that's all I'm saying. So, as I was saying before, he claims it was reviewed by an independent lab. It was not. It was reviewed by somebody that is on the FBI payroll. All the records and the compiling of the data and everything, all done by LeBeau himself. So that's the only person we have to ask or check about any of this, right? So it's just he did it all himself. Took all this on himself, right? So and is not an expert in it, right? Just saying. So then there's no evidence in the reports and stuff of any corroborative testing, to basically testing done to prove that this method that he's created works. So that's another problem when it comes to LeBeau. So then it moves on here in Shaun's book. It moves on to when the defense calls up their expert witness, which is Janine Arvizo. So she actually gets on the stand and she expresses, Shaun goes through her testimony where she's basically expressing some concerns about going through LeBeau's report of the test and looking at his the modes of things and the way that things were set up and how he checked, how he checked the measuring instruments of the machine that they were using to detect the EDTA. She goes, she went all through this report and she basically comes up with a few concerns. And the main one of those concerns that she comes up with is the fact that when they were testing the machine, they were injecting a solution that was full of EDTA. So it was like 100% almost a high saturation of EDTA. Then they took that solution and they diluted it by half and then injected that in the machine. And then they took that solution and diluted it by half and injected that in the machine until they got to the point where they didn't detect EDTA. But they still knew exactly what percentage was in the sample that they put in there, right? So this is how they're setting up the testing, trying to figure out their protocols and stuff. Okay. So what she's saying is that that's the way that they were setting up the machine or calibrating the machine to do this test. Yet the problem is that when they're getting the EDTA out of the samples or the whatever they have to test there, that those have to be chemicals have to be used to break up the blood or whatever it is that's congealed into the Q-tip or whatever that gets taken out of the Q-tip or whatever. That's then another solution might be even put in to help them with whatever process they got to do next, and then they even add some more water or whatever. She's like, so the problem I have here is how much diluting was going on with the sample before it got into the machine. And so just to give you a brief explanation, that's essentially what her concern was. She was calling it the possible diluting of samples. She was just, this is just things that she came up with looking at his report. So now, I just totally agree that he may have rushed things and fudged things, and I think that's what she's trying to say too. She's just trying to say that reading this, she actually did say his the mode statement or the testing mode or something like that or whatever that was supposed to be a basic outline of what he was looking to accomplish with this test and stuff like that. She said it was the shortest one she had ever seen. this is what she does. This is what she does for a living, is that she corroborates other scientific testing. She goes into other labs and inspects them for, you know, like, because if, say, the government wants to hire a lab to do some testing or whatever, but they want to make sure that that lab has the right protocols and whatever, and that they're not like dirty or whatever, this or that, or lazy, or there's people that skip and cut corners or whatever. So a government or somebody with a lot of money will send in somebody like her to go in and just basically go through the whole lab and check out the whole lab and check out its experiments, check out what its workers are doing and whether or not they're carrying out those experiments properly, blah, blah, blah. This is what she does. This is so if you were wondering why she would be an expert in this is why, because her job is going around and checking labs and making sure that they're doing things correctly. And that's why when she looks at this thing and she looks at that mode statement or whatever it was, something mode, I can't remember, I'm sorry. But it basically, she comments that it was the shortest one that she had ever seen, ever. I mean, hey, that's pretty crazy. So anyways, so it moves on now to her. She basically then gets cross-examined by the prosecution, and while being cross-examined by the prosecution, she's getting challenged. She really does. They challenge her quite a bit, but she just holds, man. She totally stands her ground because she's completely, you know, sure of her facts. She's totally sure of her facts, and it looks to me like even Norm Gahn even tried to confuse her or get her misdirected at one point, but she just she immediately like analyzed what he was saying and just answered the question in a way that answered like the two separate things he was talking about. It was kind of interesting. I thought it was interesting anyway. But she's smart as a whip, and she didn't fall for any of Norm, you know, because Norm Gahn was the guy that was brought in because he was the ED, he was like the DNA guy. He was the guy that understood blood and samples and all that stuff. So that's why Kratz had him there mainly, because he understood all that stuff far better than Kratz did. So that's why he was there cross-examining her. And then, like I say, totally looks like he's trying to trip her up with like a strange question, because of the way that she pauses and then answers it is just kind of strange. So, but you know, it's an interesting chapter. It's pretty crazy when you see Shaun talking about these two poor unfortunate guys that got railroaded by an expert witness. Like I said, he doesn't say the name of the expert witness, but he just says that the same one testified in two different trials and got two different men put away wrongfully, but who eventually were exonerated. And it's ridiculous, because when they went back and looked at the cases and stuff, these two guys should have never been fingered. There was a lot of reasons to exclude these two guys when they went back and looked at the cases, besides the DNA that eventually got them out. So I mean, it's just crazy. But anyway, that ends this strategy. This strategy, once again, was pay experts to lie. So that's what this one was about. So anyways, have a good day. We'll see ya. Hit subscribe if you haven't already.